You are listening to the People Centric podcast, where we talk through the toughest challenges that people face at work and give practical advice to fixing those challenges. Thanks for joining our movement to create workplaces that are happier, healthier, aligned, and empowered by putting people at the center of all that we do.
Hey, People Centric leaders. I got a great LinkedIn message from a friend a couple weeks ago, and I thought this was a great question, and we thought this would make a great topic. The question was, this person had been learning a little bit more about communication styles, and what they had learned, rightfully so, is that whenever you meet somebody who has a different communication style, a really effective way to communicate with them is to reach out to them in their style, like try to match their style a little bit. So we talk about like 4 different communication styles. We talk about whiteboard users. We talk about outliners. We talk about empathizers, and we talk about go-getters. And so like go-getters tend to talk really fast. And if you're a go-getter and you're talking really fast, but you notice the other person is kind of an empathizer, maybe slow down a little bit, ask them some questions, ask them how they're doing, those kinds of things. But the question is, aren't you manipulating that person when you do that? When you're doing that and you're trying to get them to do something, are you manipulating them because of the way that you're talking with them? And I thought that was a great question. And this person actually had a meeting with me, and she said that when she had met with me, she was thinking about that communication styles discussion when she met with me, and she tried to match my style of communication, not just the styles that we laid out, but even trying to do some mirroring and things like that you also learn about in terms of effective communication with other people. So we thought that was a great topic. We often talk about tricks of the trade, of how you can lead others, of how you can get other people to do things. And so when are we manipulating people and doing good? And when are we doing evil? That's kind of the question today. And so for our team here, we're going to dive into that topic. So first of all, we brought in Diana straight from her cave. She's in the dark. She's coming to us. She's going to represent the evil side clearly. Diana?
I'm always representing the evil side. I'm putting that out there.
If you're joining us on YouTube, you can see Diana there, and she's got a light. You've got a light out in your office. Is that the way that works?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So this is like a very tiny mushroom lamp that I'm using to like light my whole office. And for some reason it's coming off very red. And so I look a little evil in my black office with my red light.
Yeah. It's very like the Bohemian Rhapsody Queen video is what I keep thinking of every time I look at you.
I don't know what to do about it. I'm just stuck this way. I'm stuck this way for a while.
That's okay. Behind you or something.
Put what?
Maybe put like paper behind you on the wall. I don't know.
No, I like the black. I don't love the red.
She loves everything that's happening, Bethany, just to be clear.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think she's really liking her like Vader, Kylo Ren vibe that's happening right now. And I can get behind that too. Yeah.
This is okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. When we were doing the pre-recording, somebody said to Diana, they're like, you have a Vader thing. I think Stephanie said you have a Vader thing going right now. And Diana's like, oh my gosh, that's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. That's incredible. I love all of that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm,
yeah. Mm-hmm. And then on the good side, we've got Bethany Taff. Bethany, who's just the good. She always represents goodness in the world and happiness.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. It's a nice compliment too.
Yep. And then Stephanie's sitting there going like that. So where does that put me? Where does that leave me?
Wild card.
Wild card. You can go either way. You're going to help us to facilitate both directions and try to figure all of that out. And then we've also got Matt Griswold, who's going to be jumping in and out. Matt lives in this tiny town called Bolivar, Missouri, and they barely have internet out there and all that kind of stuff. And so he has trouble sometimes connecting on things. And he's going to he's not going to listen to this later, but if he knew we were talking about it.
They just got indoor plumbing like a few years ago. That's what I heard.
It's pretty nice. Yeah. No, we should, also shout out to our friends in Bolivar. We love you guys.
We do. We're kidding.
You're
kidding. A lovely town.
We love you guys. We just love to give Matt a hard time. So let's talk a little bit about manipulation. So does anybody have stories of like negative manipulation? Like when is manipulation a bad thing? So when you think about manipulation, let's look for some clear examples of things that are bad in terms of manipulation. Who's got a story they could share?
Well, I think so. Before we got on here, Stephanie was talking about the new word of the year, which I think is a really good example of bad manipulation. And the word of the year, if you didn't know, is gaslighting, apparently, which is not a new, it's not a new word. We've heard of this word. It's been used a lot, which is why it's the word of the year. Do you want to, Stephanie, do you want to tell the listeners what that means?
Yeah. So yeah, Merriam-Webster dictionary, if you don't know, every year announces a word of the year. And in the past, it's been fun things like selfie. Well, this year it's gaslighting, which is going to help lead us out of the pandemic in a really positive way. So gaslighting, it's a form of psychological manipulation. And I'm going to kind of just read some of the definition here, but it's in a type of manipulation where essentially the abuser or the person using this is trying to sow self-doubt and confusion in the victim's mind. So it's kind of this, like, if you've ever had a situation happen and there was something negative that happened and you bring it up to that person and you're like, well, I don't like that you said that, or that was really mean. They're like, well, that's not what I said, or that's really not what happened, I think are some of the most common phrases for people, where they're trying to get you to really question kind of your own knowledge or your own reality or what really happened. So yeah, super fun word to lead us into the next year. But I thought it was really appropriate when we decided to talk about manipulation, and especially manipulation, communication, and leadership, of where's that line between doing things to help people grow or gaslighting them or manipulating them in a negative way. And what does that even mean?
So I'd heard that term a lot, gaslighting, but I never quite could put my finger on what it means, because it's just kind of thrown out there. So the definition is helpful for me anyway. Can I tell a story and you guys tell me if I was manipulative or gaslighting somebody? Can I tell the story?
Yes, I can't wait.
This is going to be good.
This is going to be good.
Yeah. So when I was in high school, I played varsity tennis. No big deal. Most valuable player 2 years in a row. Not a big deal. Just who I was. It's part of how I ran. And I was playing there was a guy that was on our team, Eric. Eric, if you're out there, shout out to Eric. Was always one step behind me in the team. And you have rankings on the team and you play each other challenge matches to try to move up or down the rankings. Well, my junior and senior year, I was number one. And Eric was a year older than me, and he kept challenging me. He was number 2, and he kept challenging me for number 1. By the way, at the end of the year, he did finally beat me and took over the number 1 spot at the very, very end of the year. But I had to keep fending off Eric over and over again. Well, I kept looking for, how do I make sure I stay ahead of Eric? And so my dad had turned me on to this book called The Inner Game of Tennis. And it was written by, it's a kind of a famous book because it was written by a psychiatrist or a psychologist, counselor, brain person, about sports and sports psychology. And I read the book and I thought, boy, there's some tricks here that you can use that you can get in somebody else's head. So immediately after reading the book, Eric and I were playing a match, and Eric was playing really well that day. He was actually pulling ahead of me. He was serving really well. His forehand was really on and everything else. So I started thinking about, what can I use from that book to kind of get an advantage over Eric? And so as we were changing positions at the net, he was walking by and I said, man, Eric, your serve is on fire today. You are so good on your serve. Your serve is so great. And he goes, oh, thanks. He goes, yeah, it has been really on. I said, I noticed, your toss has been just a little bit different than what I've seen it in the past. I said, I think you're throwing the ball just a little bit more behind you than you normally do. And I said, and then I noticed, like, whenever your arm goes back, like your elbow's swinging way back. Have you noticed the different position of your elbow whenever you go to serve? And he goes, no, I hadn't even noticed that. And I'm like, yeah, your elbow's going back a little farther than it normally does too. And I think those things are coming together where your timing is just perfect on your serve. And I think it's just really coming together. And it's just, you're just absolutely destroying me right now. Well, as soon as I said that, Eric could not hit a serve to save his life. He could not he went from serving great to not being able to serve at all. But his forehand was still good. So the next changeover, I was like, yeah, I said, well, it's too bad, your serve slipped, but your forehand is still on fire. And I'm like, I noticed you're putting more topspin on the ball. It seems like you're really brushing the ball up and you're getting your shoulder into it a little bit more. And told him that. And shortly after that, he couldn't hit the tennis ball anymore. He couldn't hit a forehand anymore. The idea in sports is that when you're thinking about stuff, by the way, the psychology behind that is if you're thinking about it, you're probably not going to do it well. Like really good athletes, you learn how to do it and then you don't think about it. You think about the result of the thing you're doing, not the actual thing you're doing. So the best way to mess up somebody in golf or tennis or anything like that is to make them really focus on the mechanics of the thing that they're doing in the middle of it, because they'll do it really, really poorly. So I ended up crushing Eric the rest of that. I don't think he won a game after that. So was I manipulating Eric? Am I a terrible person? And do I owe him an apology?
Yeah, that was awful.
No, but here's the thing. Yes, you were manipulating him for sure.
For sure.
It's sports and it's a game and there's supposed to be a winner and a loser. So in that case, I don't think it's wrong that you just.
I'm gonna be a wild card here and say like yes and no, because of like what you actually said, Dawn, like could be perceived as like really helpful. Of like, wow, did you notice you did that one thing differently and it made your serve better? Of like the words that you said weren't necessarily manipulative, but because we know the motive behind them and that you were intending to mess with his head, then it is manipulative. Like had you just said that not knowing, the intent. Like, had you said that not knowing the psychology, then it was like accidentally manipulative, which we can have grace for. But because you knew what you were doing, sneaky.
So it was like the intent and also, but again, I think it's also the context too, right? Because if you were just like playing you were just like hanging out with your buddy and you guys were having that conversation, like that would have been a different kind of thing. But because you were in a game, this is a sporting event, right? Like you're trying to beat this person. That's the motivation. That's the context. That's the environment. Like, I think it makes sense.
Well, and he was, one thing, context piece. He's on my team right now. I'm trying to beat him in that moment, but he's on my team. And the one thing I noticed is his serve went to crap for weeks after that. It wasn't like he got it back after the game.
Eric.
Was over.
He was on your team. Did you say that?
Yeah, he did.
Okay.
But still.
Never mind. I take it back.
Well, I had to beat him. I was fending him off in practice, Beth, and he was trying to take my number one position. So it's in tennis, you're competing against people to get ranked because then your number one player plays the other team's number one player and so on. So when you're number one, there's no place to challenge. You're just defending off people. Okay. And so I had to keep fending off Eric because he kept beating everybody else on our team, but then he would keep playing me over and over again. So in a way, it's his fault.
I'm less supportive of it now, so I take it back.
Oh wow. next episode is going to be on judgment. Clearly,
yeah, that's right.
You guys turned on me really fast here.
Well, we're just trying to hold you accountable. Another example I was thinking of like bad manipulation, and I don't think this is controversial, but we always think of politicians, right, when it comes to manipulation, and they're very well known. And not all of them, but let's just say most of them are very known for making promises or saying they're going to do something to win votes, and then maybe not doing those things once they get into office, or not really having the power to do those things in their specific office, or changing their mind on those things once they get into office. And so that's one example that I think of in our real life when it comes to manipulation.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to be made, and kind of made me think of like a situation in my life before. I had a workplace once with a really manipulative coworker who, in order to do things their way, because they really thought that how they did things and the logic behind why they did things was the absolute best and only way to do things.
Yes, I understand this. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Keep talking. Yep.
And that inherently isn't necessarily bad, but then what this person did to try to have power over how other people did things is then when someone would do something a different way, the criticism was like, well, you just don't really understand this. And they would point at that topic, or like, you don't really understand that. Or I've been in business for this many years and I've done it this way so many times that you're just young in business and you don't understand. Or, this person was really bad at delegitimizing people's feelings. So when someone would say, well, when this situation happened, it made me feel this way. Well, you didn't feel that way because this was this and this was that and that was that. And I remember even looking at this person once and going like, you can't tell me that my feelings or my experience is wrong. It was my experience. If you're having a different experience, that's okay. But of like, in that moment of that person would manipulate kind of the power of influence they had with the group to just get people to do things the way that they wanted to do it, regardless if that was actually like helpful to the team. And it ended up really breaking the team apart and isolating a lot of people within the organization. And so it's like kind of that using your power of influence for good or for evil in that sense of, are you doing this so that you can have power and control? Or are you doing this to actually help their people do their job well? Because I can say from my experience in that situation, like if we were just, the goal was helping everyone do their job well, then everyone would be able to use their own gifts and strengths and everyone would do things different ways instead of we all just do them this way.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the theme there is the intent of the person who's doing this thing, using this power. But I like in your story too, by the way, anytime I hear in a conversation, somebody starts quoting their resume, I can't think of a good conversation from that. Like I always watch that in conversation, just as a consultant and somebody who works in a lot of different conversations, been in a lot of conflict and those kinds of things. When somebody's quoting their resume, I've never heard anybody go, "Oh, well, I stand corrected. I'm sorry. You are fully qualified to have that." I mean, that's when you're throwing qualifications out, it's a bad thing. But I think that the other part of that point is that the person who you're talking about wasn't really open to the fact that they might be wrong. Which we talk a lot about as being a key to effective communication, is that knowing that you might go into something being wrong. So let me throw another scenario out to you and see if this is considered manipulation or not, or if it's evil or good or bad, whatever this is, since I got your judgment the first time. So a lot of times, like when we facilitate groups, discussions or things, we will want to draw out somebody who's maybe quieter in the room. Well, there are some tricks to the trade that we know that Matt has he does some really good workshops on this to train people on this, where you can use body language to draw somebody into the conversation. That person's probably not fully aware that we're doing that in the conversation, but you can literally walk to the person, you can make eye contact with them, you can kind of open up your body language to them, and you can kind of make somebody speak in a meeting who wasn't going to speak in the meeting. Now, you can't really force them to technically, but it works a lot of the time. Is that manipulation when we're trying to facilitate a conversation and bring somebody into the mix and get them to speak?
I think it is technically manipulation, right? Like technically it is. But I think the intent behind it is to make sure that everyone is included, that people's voices are heard, that people who are not generally comfortable sharing do get some airtime to share and some space to share. So I don't know that it's ill-intended. I think, again, we were saying like the intent behind it means something, but I think it is definitely manipulation, like technically.
See, that's where I think Stephanie said it a minute ago, basically, but I think that there's a difference between manipulation and influence. And maybe I'm wrong. This is just how I perceive it. Because I know that there's a positive definition of manipulation, right? But I think those are two different things. I think there's manipulation I view as a lot more negative, and I view influence as really positive, and they can look similar, but I think the difference is the intent behind it. And so I think that in that way, we influence people in the room when we show up and we help them see, like, we want to hear from them, and we're going to do some things to try to make it known that we want to hear from them, and we want to give them an opportunity to speak. And sometimes there are ways that we also help decrease how much some other people in the room might speak who are speaking up a lot and taking up too much space in the room. And so we do both of those things, not because we don't care about people and we are trying to control the conversation in a bad way or a negative way, but because we want to move the conversation along, and we want to give everybody an opportunity to speak. And so that's the difference that I think there is.
Yeah, I think that's a great clarification. And it made me think of, maybe Dawn said this earlier, of the use of like mirroring in conversation. If you've ever heard that before, in like negotiating worlds or the sales world, of where like you should just mirror back to people what they said. So if I say something of like, oh, well, I was just trying to help him find his way, you would just go, his way? And like ask it back as a question. And it's one of those tricks that like, once you know it, you can't unhear it, kind of people using it. But I think that's like one of those things, like it's a communication tool, but it kind of can be used for good or evil manipulation. Like bad manipulation would be, I am using that to try to corner you. I'm trying to get you to say something that maybe you don't really want to say, or I'm using it to make you uncomfortable in that space, where I'm just trying to show that I have power over you and I can get you to where you want to go, or I can make you say that thing that you really don't want to say. I can make you agree with me. But positive mirroring could be, maybe I'm noticing that you're having trouble like naming what you're feeling. You're having a hard time putting to words kind of what the problem is, or how we could solve it. So I might mirror you to help you clarify what you're thinking. Because then when you say, well, help him find his way, find his way. And you're like, well, then this is what I mean. And we might actually start putting some constructive pieces together to help you help someone or get you where you want to go. So this is something I was thinking of, Bethany, of like that good distinction that you made there.
It's almost like there's this superpower, like we've discovered the force or something, right? And you can use the force in different ways. And do you go the dark side of the force, Diana, or do you go the light side, the good side, and follow the light, right? And to try to help people with that power. But the power is significant. Like when you learn the mirroring and asking questions and facilitation techniques and things like that, it's amazing what you can get people to do. I remember going into one meeting and I made a bet with somebody that I said, I'll bet I can get 3/4 of the people in this room to cross their arms during the meeting. And I did it. Like we accomplished it without saying anything, without saying cross your arms. That would have been cheating. Without saying cross your arms, I got 3/4 of the people to cross their arms. And you just do it by engaging people directly. And I had my arms crossed. And you could just sit there and try it sometime, by the way, for in a meeting. You can have fun. You can see how powerful these techniques are that people don't even realize that they're doing it. Is just take a stance. You could put your hands, on your face like this when you're talking. And if you're engaging people and you're watching them, people will eventually start to mirror you and sit the same way. Yeah. Like, see, everybody's doing it. Diana,
so weird. Crazy.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Come on,
Wild.
Diana. Come on, Diana, join us.
No, I
Don't be
won't.
afraid.
You
It's
will
okay,
not
don't
be
be afraid.
manipulated.
Yeah. If you can't see us, Stephanie and Bethany quickly joined me, but Diana is resisting. Well, that's resistance is futile. Bethany, I loved your point before talking about leadership. We talk about leadership meaning really influence, and which means that leadership can be effective or not effective. So some leaders are really good at influencing other people. Some people aren't. Some people aren't good at those skills to be able to get other people to do something. But we also talk about then if leadership is influence, you can influence people badly. We've talked about toxic employees. Sometimes you're on a team. You have an injustice that you're fighting against in terms of your company, and you might even be right. It's not about right or wrong. It's about misalignment, and you're leading the team the wrong direction. You can use your leadership traits for negativity. It sounds like what we're saying, manipulation is kind of a cousin of leadership. It's a form of influence that can be used good or bad. Stephanie, you brought the point in our pre-recording here about there's two different definitions of manipulation, right? And what are the two definitions?
Yeah. So one is like more of like what we think of like tactile manipulation, of like the baby learned how to manipulate the blocks and put them in the right holes for the right shapes. Like the star goes in the star shape, the square goes in the square. So that's like a use of positive manipulation. Or like the chiropractor manipulated my back. I'm like, that's a great feeling. But then there's this other definition of manipulation that I think we as a society are more attuned with, which is that negative connotation, where like she manipulated, her to get her to do this. And it's almost like this, they use the word insidious in the definition, which is a great Scrabble word, by the way. But of like, I think most of the time when we think of manipulation, we just think of that negative, of there isn't the skillful, artful moving of things piece that gets attached to it.
Yeah, I really like that. And to add on to what you were saying, Dawn, is like, yeah, we can totally think of really really powerful leaders in history, right? Or in the world, who are for sure leaders. I'm saying bad leaders in the sense that I think that they are evil, but they're good leaders in the fact that like they do influence negatively. They're really good at negatively influencing people, right? They're really good at manipulating people. So they have that sort of superpower that's used for evil. Anyways, did I confuse everybody?
No, I was listening to a podcast this morning, and a major politician said, it's in politics, the third rail isn't meaning what you say, it's saying what you mean. And I thought it kind of goes back to what you said about politicians as a group. They learn you don't say all the things that you're actually thinking, because if you say those things, they become sound bites and they get used against you, and then they limit your effectiveness in terms of how you work with others. But so I think we're all agreeing that manipulation is not always bad and not always good. Manipulation as a word sure sounds bad, right? And I don't think anybody says, we're going to teach you, if we did a workshop, how to manipulate others. I think it'd be interesting to see who attended that. But
I would be there. I would be there
Diana
with my dark powers and try to rule the world with them.
I think people would want to sit near you just to learn from you, just
Yep.
to pick up a little bit from here and there. And they wouldn't even know why they were doing it. It would be something that you did probably. So I think maybe to put a bow on this in terms of manipulation, I think we keep talking about, is it good, well-intended or not well-intended? I would say, and I think a lot of you would agree with me that when we talk with people, most people don't have a bad intention. Like, it's very seldom do we meet a manager who's like, whoa, I'm going to go meet with my employees and mess them over. Like they have some kind of a good intention. So when is it a bad intention? Like when do people, if it's okay to embrace these powerful skill sets that we talk about in terms of working closely with people, but we're doing it, where is the line at in terms of good intention and bad intention?
Yeah, I liked what you just said, Don, of like, I kind of truly believe like everybody's good, innately good, right? And so even in the story I shared earlier, thinking of that person, I know they were really trying to do the right thing. They wanted the company to be successful. They wanted us to achieve the goals, to help the people, to do all these things. I think where it became bad intentioned is then when it was brought to light and people were, hey, I don't like how this is being communicated. I don't like how this feels, that this person then kind of just brushed all that off, So it's also, I think, like being open to hearing feedback on how you communicate and how these things are being done, and that you may not ever intend for it to be manipulative or bad. But if someone comes to you and says that made me feel manipulated, that made me feel bad, of just recognizing like, oh, wow, like maybe I need to adjust and change that. Because then if you know and you don't change, then I think it's manipulative at that point.
I also think it's when, how do I say this? Okay, so you know how we talk about toxic employees and how they generally have good intent, right? I am leading the organization in a different direction. I want it to go somewhere else. My leaders don't want it to go somewhere else, but I see that if it went this way, it would be really successful and good. But no one is trying to make the company go that way. But if you're leading that revolt and you're trying to like gather followers to move people or company in a direction that it doesn't want to go, that's probably bad manipulation. And I'm saying this having done it. Like, I have worked in a place where I wanted something to be changed and the leaders were like, no, we like it this way. Like, we're not going to go that direction. And I kept saying, I think this is the right direction. I think if you did this, you would be wildly successful. I think this is how you need to do it. And so I would use others to deliver my message as well. So I was like, if everybody is saying we should do this, they'll listen. They didn't. I shouldn't have done that. But I think I used others and that influence I had over others in a bad way, like to lead them a direction we shouldn't have gone.
So in other words, we're saying nothing is more dangerous than a person who knows that they're right.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I still contend that I was right. Did I do the right thing? No. Was I right about it? Yeah. Like, I still will say I was right about the direction I was trying to get people to go. I had semi good intent, but it was still not what the company wanted. It was still not the direction they were ever going to go, but I was trying to lead it that way.
Yeah. So it's like, is it for truly for the good of the other person? And you can only do so much to try to help influence them in the right way, towards the right direction. And then knowing that, like, if they're not ready to move towards that direction, Diana, like you were saying, that's when it's time to like take a step back, because then that's when you start to turn into like, okay, now it's going to become manipulation. Now it's going to become toxic, me trying to like influence in this way. And so it's kind of knowing that line as you're starting those conversations. To start the conversation, I don't think that's wrong or manipulative. I think it's the beginning, and you will discover in that moment how you want to move forward with your influence as you continue to go forward. Yeah.
It very much did feel like leading a revolt. It felt like I was trying to get people to see that if they came to my side, it would be better, right? Like, it felt like I was definitely trying to do that. And looking back, I recognize that was the wrong way and I shouldn't have, but that's what it felt like in the moment. Like, I'm doing this for good. I'm doing this for the company. I'm doing this for the people. Come with me. You know, it very much felt like leading a revolt.
Yeah. And it reminds me too of, you know, when we're coaching with people, sometimes we are doing some of this. We're sort of mirroring and matching communication styles with people. Sometimes that means when they are, my tendency is not to be like super direct and like loud and like fill up the whole room. That's not my tendency, my natural tendency. But sometimes I've had people who I'm coaching who I've had to match their style, who are like that a little bit, to be able to get their attention, because that's how they communicate. And so I think that like there have been people that I've coached in the past who have been sort of like combative and been in that toxic world. And I can match them to a certain extent to try to like talk them through it and help confront them with a situation and try to like hopefully change them over time, right? And there is sort of like this pivotal moment, and I can't tell you when it is really, but there's sort of a pivotal moment where like me and this person make a decision and how we're going to continue our conversations forward like that. Like, I can continue to press really hard and maybe start to manipulate them, or I can like start to retreat a little bit and sort of change like what my influence looks like in a positive way. And then they also have to make a decision too of how they're going to respond. And if I see that like they're not responding at a certain point, like I have to know where my line is to cut off, because my end goal is not necessarily to make them do what I want them to do what I want them to do, right? But like, I want it to be their decision. And so I'm not necessarily winning if I just get them to do what I want them to do. That's control. That's manipulation. That's a different thing. I need them to make that decision themselves. And so that's just another nuance to it that I've seen in the work that we do.
Yeah. And I like that you said that they have to own that decision. They have to own that direction. When we're coaching people, that's really important. A lot of times we'll meet somebody and our team will have discussions. We talk about our clients together, and we will have strong opinions because we've got lots of experience, lots of different organizations, lots of leaders. We'll have strong opinions about, oh, if this person did this and this person did this and this person did this, things would be a lot better. But we have to walk people and we have to ask people questions to get them to recognize that. And then I think even more importantly and kind of subtly, and I think this podcast topic is a good reminder for all of us about this, is we have to also acknowledge that the direction we may want to push them might be wrong. And I think I can think of lots of examples where it's like, I would have chosen a path for a person that we were working with down, path A, but they chose path B. And if in our coaching and in our direction, if we continue to hold that A, like that's an absolute right, then we're going to be unsuccessful. Now we're manipulating them. And even if they end up following A, it's not going to be good. It's not going to be in their best interest. So I love this discussion. I think it does talk about how leadership and manipulation are similar things to each other. I think also the superpowers that you can get, it's the Spider-Man quote, right? Which is also, I think somebody said it before, Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. That came up in an earlier podcast. Somebody emailed us and told us who actually said that. Do you remember that? I don't remember who said it now. But somebody emailed us and said, here's who actually said that. I apologize. Email us again and tell us who actually said that, because it was before Spider-Man.
Google it probably.
Spider-Man's quoting somebody else. It's not, everything doesn't come from Marvel, but a lot of things do. But it's this idea that this is great power, but how do you wield this power in the right way? And I think what we're saying is that you yield it in the common interest, and also yield it humbly, knowing that you could be absolutely wrong in the direction. Well, I think this is a great conversation. I love these when we get to dive into these things. I think it's good for our team, and glad that you get to be a part of it too as a people-centric leader. So please keep the feedback coming. That's great. We love to take topics that are thrown to us. That one came to us through social media. So reach out to us. You can also email us and contact us about other topics. But thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the People Centric podcast. We are so grateful for you joining us every week. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Also, feel free to share on your social media with everyone that you know. It really does help us. If you would like to contact us, I have put our information in the show notes. Please reach out anytime. We love hearing from you. We will be back next week with a new topic.